Hello, WHO. This is your war correspondent, Jack Shelley, reporting again from somewhere in Holland. The German bulge into southern Belgium is steadily crumbling these days, as you've been told, under the closing pinchers of the American First Army from the north and the Third Army from the south. But it's still a hard and bitter fight, and I hope you haven't been given the impression that the Nazi opposition has suddenly fallen apart, or that the struggle has become an easy rout. I heard the other day, for example, that some newspapers in London reported the situation in the bulge was remindful of the days of the American breakthrough in France. Now that gives an impression of a great sweeping drive in which our forces knifed through with blinding speed and then looped around to cut off huge numbers of the enemy. And to say that's the way the battle has gone, down there in the snowdrift and the bitter cold of the Ardennes, is cruelly unfair to the foot soldiers and the tank men who've had to fight their way slowly forward in what, to my mind, has been one of the bitterest offensive actions Americans ever fought against almost indescribable handicaps of terrain and weather. I've been down on the First Army front again, and I can tell you that although the enemy is being pushed steadily back, and his great offensive into Belgium is a thing of the past, every yard of these gains must still be paid for at a high cost in many parts of the front. We're still slogging our way through dense forests of pine and painfully working our way up steep ridges, fighting through snowdrifts many feet deep, trying to pick our way through dense German minefields and against a furious Nazi fire. The Germans may be withdrawing from a large part of the bulge, but the rear guards they leave behind to protect that withdrawal are fighting all the harder. But the weather, thank goodness, has taken a turn for the better the last few days, and a bright sun was shining, although the air was still cold and crisp, when I went down to visit the 3rd Armored Division, which has been doing one of the outstanding jobs of this bitter campaign. And that gave us the thing we have missed so severely during the earlier stages of this attack: air support. Far up in the cold blue ceiling, I saw 200 American heavy bombers drone over within 5 minutes, their silver bodies gleaming in the winter sunlight, long white vapor trails caused by their passage through the cold atmosphere of the high altitudes unrolling behind them. Long before you can see the planes themselves, you spot these trails of white advancing through the blue, and after the bombers have passed, the milky traces hang in the sky for hours. The heavies passed on over, a beautiful sight that made almost every soldier who wasn't actually locked in battle stop to look up and smile. It's good to see your own air power up after so many days when you didn't have it because of weather. Farther south, over the German lines, puffs of anti-aircraft fire began to appear among the bomber formations, tiny little white balls that advanced ahead of the planes. The bombers altered their course now and then, but otherwise seemed unaffected by the flak. They headed on, apparently bound for a target deep in the German bulge. We went on down to the front, and in a small room of a typical shell-torn Belgian village, we talked to General Rose, the handsome, gray-haired, forceful commander of the 3rd Armored Division. As we talked, we had to cut off our conversation every few moments when the blast of our own artillery drowned out every other sound, shook the house, and rattled the few windows left in the place. There was a rough fight going on in the village of Mont-Laban, held by the Germans. We heard a colonel commanding a task force report by radio from a command tank that he had pushed elements of his force into the town and was fighting his way through it against bitter opposition. We moved down closer and saw a sight that made the fighting men cheer. Circling up in the blue were American Thunderbolt fighter bombers. They peeled off their formation one by one and came screaming down on the target just on the other side of the wooded hill from where we stood. It was the best view of a dive bombing I've had yet. You could plainly see the cluster of bombs released from the plane as it reached the bottom of the dive. You could hear the rattle of German anti-aircraft fire as the Thunderbolt nosed down on the target, and then the blast of the bombs as they fell, a concussion we could feel from where we stood. One by one, the planes pounded the German position, and you could see the smiles broaden on the faces of the Armored Division men. This was the kind of air support they'd gone without for days as they battled through snow and fog and bitter cold. The air and armor combination, proved so often before, was getting a chance to function again. By the time we left, most of the bitterly fought town of Mont-Laban had been cleared. We went back by way of Fréjus, the little village near a vital crossroads, where some of the most savage fighting of this whole attack raged within the last week. All the way back to the crossroads, there was evidence of the deadly battle. Here lay the frozen body of a German soldier, there an American. Beside the road, burned out tanks, many of them, and most of them ours, because we were attacking. Some of the tanks turned completely over. Others with turrets blown entirely off, the turrets hurled yards away from the rest of the chassis. The stone buildings of the little town of Crépieux completely gutted, only a few blackened walls left standing, and the trees of the forest along the road, torn and splintered, and those that were not broken off, gouged by flying shrapnel. Yes, the German Bulge is being collapsed. But please, in the name of the brave men who are fighting and dying here, don't let anyone tell you it's easy. It's bitter and brutal, and it takes almost incredible courage and endurance, and a lot of American lives. This is Jack Shelley, speaking from somewhere in Holland. I return you to Des Moines.